Hello, hope you're doing great. This is Maria Panni Rajan, and recently I completed a course called Claude in Action. It's basically this particular course from the Anthropic Academy, and yeah, they even gave me this nice certification of completion and all. It's pretty cool. And in this video, I would like to share my key takeaways from completing this course. All right, so you can find this course here in Anthropic's official academy, and so it's right over here, and it's pretty comprehensive in a way. It introduces you to using AI coding agents. I found it really useful and got a lot of insights by taking this course. And in this video, I would like to just share the two key takeaways that stuck with me. All right. So the first thing that I understood is the thing that makes Claude Code, like Claude Code, which is an AI coding assistant, useful is its access to tools. What I mean by that is, so basically the first thing is tools. All right. So in that course, they explain beautifully how Anthropic has this separation of concern. We have our Claude Code, all right, and then you have Claude itself, all right. So what is the difference between Claude Code and Claude? So Claude Code is, the way I understood it is an aggregator of tools, all right, whereas Claude is the LLM, all right. So you have highly refined LLM in Claude, and Claude offers reasoning for us basically, and then you have this Claude Code, which is essentially an aggregation of a bunch of tools, all right, and they work like hand in hand, and that's like the beauty of this. So they work together to give us this AI coding experience. So they explained beautifully how this Claude, which essentially Claude would include all the different models that Claude comes with, basically like Haiku or Sonnet and Opus. So here an LLM can basically take in text as input, right, and then it can basically output, it can process something, it can do some reasoning, and then it essentially outputs text, right. So you get text as input, and then the LLM does some processing, and it outputs text, right. So that's essentially what an LLM can do. But then like in the middle, in this part, right, when it is doing this reasoning, if you give this LLM access to tools, right, it can do magic. So that's where the connection is essentially. So you have text, like this would be like all the queries and whatever task you give to the LLM, it is given as input, and the LLM reasons through it, and based on the context, it has access to tools to do things like read a file, write to a file, edit a file, or you can even give more advanced tools by giving it access through an MCP, or you can create all these custom tools through commands and so on. And essentially, like at the end of the day, you're just connecting LLMs to these tools, right? And these tools, what are they? They're just like at the end of the day, tools themselves are just pieces of software, right? Tools What they call tools is essentially just, an executable. That's all it is, exe, right? It's just an executable that you can run on a computer, right? They're just software that you can write, and you just allow your LLMs to connect to those different executables, and LLM decides when to evoke each of them, and based on the results that are returned from those respective pieces of software, the LLM reasons through and decides what it needs to do, and then finally it returns an output. So that's essentially how these AI coding assistants work, right? So you have like your LLM, and then you have your tools aggregator, right, talking with each other. So now this is one key takeaway that that stuck with me, and the other is this concept of context engineering. Okay, what is that? Now, the main engine of all of this is this LLM, right? Like the LLM is the key breakthrough, right? You already had tools, like even before we had aggregators of tools, like you had all these multiple small tools that were being used. But this LLM is the orchestrator, if you will, of all these tools that you give access to, right? So so you have the LLM, right? In this case, Claude, having all these different tools, right? And it gets the job done by means of connecting to appropriate tools based on the context. So context, right? So that's the keyword. Now, LLMs are able to reason through the context you give them, right? So that's another key idea, the context you give them. So that means over here, if you give too much context to an LLM, it can easily get confused, right? So in that course they beautifully explain how, so there could be all these different pieces of the puzzle you're putting together when you're building your piece, your project, when you're building your software or technology, right? So you have like like context 1, and then context 2, context 3, context 4. There could be all these different domains of ideas that are there, right? So now it is up to you as the captain of the ship to steer this LLM by means of giving the appropriate context. So there could be all these different pieces of context like C6 and C7 and so on, but instead of, if you just give it everything, if you just give the LLM all the context that there is, first of all, it's going to consume a lot of tokens, which is wasteful. And second of all, the LLM's reasoning is going to be polluted with stuff it doesn't require. It's much like how when we think through things to arrive at a solution, would want to focus our ideas, right? Focus our thoughts. It's something similar to that. So instead of bombarding it with all this data, just find the appropriate, maybe it just requires context 1 and context 3. So that's all the ideas it requires. So it is up to us as builders of technology, right? Software engineers, to find the context that is relevant to the task at hand and only give that context to the LLM, right? Only give the appropriate context to the LLM so that the LLM can then talk to appropriate tools to get a job done for you, right? So that's essentially like what context engineering is, and that's like the real skill right now. So in summary, like the key ideas that I found very insightful after taking this course is, first of all, the magic of these AI agents is tools, right? And the skill here is our ability to use existing tools, and so it's basically the skill. So what's the skill here? So the skill that we need to develop is, first of all, use existing tools and also create custom tools. Like custom tools for our, and again, when we say tools, they are just like piece of software, right? That the agents use. So these are tools, and these are executables that the agents use, not the humans. I mean, obviously, maybe the humans can also use it, but these are executables that are available for the agent's toolbox. So the skill here is to understand all the existing tools that we could give our agent, and also to build custom ones, so that when you talk with the LLM, so at the end of the day, all of this is being used by the LLM, right? So LLM, right? So that the LLM can consume least amount of tokens to get the job done. It doesn't need to reinvent the wheel every time. And the second is like context engineering. So second is context engineering. So here, even though the LLM has access to all these tools, only if we steer it, the way we steer it is through giving the right context. So in order to do this, first of all, we need to understand context and domain, have domain expertise. And only when we have the right domain expertise can we even steer the LLM by means of giving the appropriate context as we get the job done using these LLM tools. Yeah, so basically this was really useful, the course. Definitely, if you all have the time, do check out Claude Code in action from Anthropic Academy. It's pretty insightful. So thanks for watching. Cheers.